the Drake Group Education Fund is dedicated to educating the public and professionals in our business with fact-based information featuring the experts in our profession, so that we might all do a better job of helping college athletes realize the promise of an educational degree and becoming all they can be as students and athletes, as well as the athletic administrators who are managing these programs. So we welcome you to our 39th webinar. This will be our last webinar for the academic year, with the series beginning again in September. So thank you again to all of our panelists for their time, expertise, and ideas that they're donating today, and to all of you for attending. Webinars provide us with the opportunity to share new ideas, recalibrate our thinking on issues, and get up to date on important topics. We're so pleased to have you join us. And with that, I will switch gears here as our moderator, and I will, unless Donna Lopiano can make it in and take over that, we're calling an audible here, and I will be your moderator. So let's begin with the questions, and I will begin with Nicole Lavoie, PhD. Thank you for being here. Nicole is the director of the Tucker Center for Research on Girls and Women Sports at the University of Minnesota. She is considered to be one of the nation's leading scholars on gender, leadership, and women coaches. I've asked her to set the stage for our discussion by giving us a factual overview of the current state of women in coaching and athletic administration. And just a few more quick predicate questions, Nicole. So many female coach terminations involve allegations of coach abuse based on student evaluations of their athletic experiences or parent-player complaints. What does research tell us about the reliability of student evaluations of teachers and their use as justifications for employment decisions? We'll start with that.
Yeah, so thanks, Julie, and thanks for everyone for tuning in. And we'll just jump right in here. We have a great lineup for you today, and I'm honored to be on the screen with them. What I want to do is just a quick level set around the data. So we have known for decades that women coaches, sport coaches, and administrators face a multitude of barriers over the course of their careers to get in, to stay in, and the challenges to get back in the game when they get fired. And we also know there's very few support. So if you think of the system where you have society, where you have racism, sexism, homophobia, gender bias, then you have the organizational layer, who's in positions of power, what policies are there to support, what resources are there. And then the network, we know that there is the Old Boys Club is alive and well, and women often do not have the support and the network that they need in terms of mentors and sponsors to support them. And then at the individual level, what often happens is women get blamed and criticized for the underrepresentation of women in these positions, which precisely keeps the people in positions of power in place. So there is a lot of research around the barriers that women in sport administration and coaching face. And if you want, I'll drop perhaps in the Q&A a link to our Women in College Coaching Report Card that we do every year. We're in the 12th year this summer. It tracks the percentage of women coaching women over time, and it has been going up. But what I want to say is that counting coaches, whether they're women coaches or coaches of color, is really only one measure of the system. And the real issues that we have got to tackle, gender bias and racism, that's rampant and prevalent in collegiate athletics. So with that sort of set, the second question that Julie asked is, what do we know about student evaluations or of student athletes evaluations of coaches? And what do we know about the research about the reliability of said evaluations of students and student athletes? So what I can tell you is that there is a lot of research about teacher evaluations in higher education. But first I want to say that no one on this screen, and I'm certainly nobody on tuning in, wants coach abuse of athletes, okay? We know the downsides of not taking athlete complaints of coach abuse seriously. So we're not saying that athlete feedback should not be taken seriously, but I want to frame that athlete complaints, just like students, and I'm a teacher, I teach lots of undergrads, and their evaluations are layered in gender, cultural, and racial bias. And we know that because there is a large body of research that says these student evaluations of teachers and obviously student athletes of coaches are unreliable and problematic because they are proven that the instructor's gender, race, ethnicity, accent, sexual orientation impacts student ratings. And what happens is women compared to men are perceived as less competent, less educated, where the men are perceived as being more competent, more enthusiastic, more organized, and the men are penalized less. And this, we could also probably draw the parallel to coaches. Now, what we do know is that there is very little, if any, research around student athletes' biased evaluations of coaches or athletic administration's interpretations of the student athletes' evaluations of coaches. So there's a big gap there, but we can draw on the fact that there's a large body of research around students' evaluations of teachers, where students over and over again prefer men and masculine traits and penalize women who don't conform to feminine stereotypes, traditional ones, of being kind and caring and relationship oriented. So I'm just going to stop there and I can elaborate more, but we have a lot to talk about. But I just want to level set that in terms of our discussion today.
Thank you. And Nicole, we're still on you with some predicate questions here.
Okay.
Before we move on, what does the research tell us about the double standard applied to the evaluation of male and female coaches? Is there a difference based on the sex of the evaluator and the person being evaluated? Would you like to elaborate any more on that?
I'll just say a few other quick points about that. First of all, I didn't say this, but it is a terrible idea to have student athletes evaluations be the sole basis for the career longevity or tenure of coaches. It's a terrible idea. But that's exactly what's happening. And there is no standardized student athlete evaluation across higher education that I know about. So what do we know about the research? There isn't a lot, but we do know that there is a host of double standards that female athletes of female coaches and male athletes of female coaches happen. So it could look like this. Complaints by athletes are treated differently towards women coaches than male coaches. Complaints by parents about female coaches are treated differently than male coaches. There's different practices and standards when used to investigating female coaches. Female coaches aren't allowed to have a lot of latitude in their coaching methodologies, which are widely permitted for male coaches. Female coaches are held to higher standards than their male coaches. They're judged and evaluated differently. They're paid less for performing better. And they are penalized very differently for the same behaviors that are afforded to men. And one that I've been hearing of a lot recently is related to motherhood. And this is that, I just heard this yesterday at a call with someone. Women with children, mother coaches, are usually cannot travel with their children and are told that the child is a liability and a distraction, where their male counterparts can bring their children along road trips and they're celebrated for being a great dad. So these are just some of the double standards. These are just some, not all, that women coaches face in the occupational landscape of college athletics.
Thank you. And you touched upon the compensation. Is there anything you would add regarding research on the compensation of male versus female coaches with similar years of experience or coaching success, or whether males and female coaches are equally qualified for coaching or administrative positions?
Well, they're absolutely equally qualified, if not more qualified, than their male counterparts, because they have to be in order to succeed in the landscape and be hired or be taken seriously. But honestly, there's not a lot of documented research on pay inequities, because for many schools, it's not public knowledge. And I know because I've looked for it. So like University of Minnesota, I'm a public state employee. You can go and look up what I'm paid. I wouldn't want you to do that, but you could. You might want to give me a raise if you did that. But for a school like Northwestern or Duke, you can't find the data, and if you ask for it, they will not give it to you. So it's really hard to make those comparisons, and it's also hard to take in market value, cost of living, years of tenure, career experiences, success. There's a lot of variables that go into salary. Like, I know University of Michigan pays their coaches really well compared to Minnesota. I don't know why, but they just do. So there's a lot of variables into that equation that nobody's really teased out. But I think the assumption is that women coaches are paid less than their male counterparts, which is in fact somewhat true, because the highest paid coaches are men because of football and men's basketball. So, there's a lot of variables in there to tease that out.
As well as the weight coaches, right?
As well as the what?
As well as the weight coaches.
Right.
So
Absolutely.
I want to welcome and thank everyone for their patience with our technical difficulties, that now Rita and Donna have arrived. And I would like to pass the ball as a team member here over back to Donna to take the next questions with Rita.
Julie, you came off the bench like a real pro. Really appreciate it. Sorry I'm late, gang. So now that we leave the research and Nicole, we begin to talk to coaches and administrators who have experienced the reality of the double standard. And first up is Rita Crockett. Following a stunning playing career as a USA national team member, earning Olympic and World Championship medalist honors, and as a professional player in both beach and indoor volleyball, Rita turned to coaching. She has earned honors as a high school, club, and college and national team coach. She has been AVCA National Coach of the Year. She's a member of too many halls of fame for us to go over. She's also a former athletic administrator, having served as an assistant AD and a head beach volleyball and indoor volleyball coach while at Florida International University. And she also has the unique history as a Black woman beach volleyball player, few and far between. But Rita, you've done it all. A dual sport head coach with significant administrative responsibilities. Can you share what you've experienced with regard to double standards, with regard to work expectations or compensation, and whether you've observed differences in treatment at FIU of women coaches and administrators?
Yes, I first of all, thank you for having me. And I'm not the most techie person, but I finally made it through my phone. So, whew, boy, anyway, I do have, as far as the whole gamut, I guess you could say, just to say most of all, I did put some notes down here. First of all, as far as female coaches at FIU compared to the male coaches, there were, when I was there were 4 female coaches in head coaches, and there are 14 sports. So just that alone let you know, we're a little bit in the minority there. As far as pay, salary, I think you mentioned that. I coached 2 teams, the indoor court and beach, and was compensated less than a coach that would coach one of those sports for many years, for 7 years, to be honest. And I was always held to that standard of, you need to get the team, to have good records and this and this and this. And we did. We had very good records academically. I mean, we were great. I didn't have a lot of people transferring. We were top 15 in the nation for beach every year that the beach program existed, which I started. And we made it to conference twice for indoor. I mean, we didn't have the best records, but everybody graduated, everybody was good students, and we did get to conference several times. So there was just, it was very hard to please, and I'm kind of a pleaser. So I was chasing my tail, just constantly chasing my tail. And it was very draining. So, I don't know.
So there are 4 out of the 14 women's sports coaches who were women?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes,
And
that was
how many coaches in men's sports were women?
none. And let me tell you this, when I was the indoor coach and the beach coach, there were only 3, because I counted as 2.
Two
And then
slots, right.
when I moved over to just beach, then yes, there were only 4 women coaches.
And I trust that there were no men coaches on staff who had 2 sports and an administrative assignment.
No, unless you count the track, who had outdoor, indoor, that's kind of one thing.
Got it. And how big was the athletic director senior staff?
From what I recall, we had 8, including the athletic director. And there were 2 women, and one of the women came a little bit later. So there were 2 women.
Were you one of the senior staff members?
No, actually, you're going to love this. Actually, when I went over to just be beach volleyball and stopped doing indoor, they took the title away from me. So I was no longer an assistant AD. I was just the beach volleyball coach.
Was there any mention on the part of FIU about athlete complaints? Or was there a history of dissatisfaction in your annual evaluations or whatever with regard to your performance in any of the jobs you held?
Yeah, my supervisor was constantly telling me that the surveys were coming in negative, and I just couldn't understand that. I mean, I cooked breakfast for these guys because we didn't have it in our budget. I had them to my house. We did so many things to try to make them happy. We did a board meeting once a month, so that they could put their input in. I tried to do so many things, and my supervisor would constantly tell me, the surveys are coming in negative. You have 50% that are good, 50% that are bad. And I had 2 teams for a very long time. So I had over 30, almost 40 kids, because we had to carry 19 kids per sport. So it was just very demoralizing for me, because, I take pride in making people happy.
So you had a minimum roster you had to keep?
Yes.
Which is
yes, we had
against
to have
9 rules.
18 and 19. They changed it each year. And for beach, there's only 5 teams, which means there's only 10 players that get a lot of play.
Got it.
So
did you have any female advocates above you? Either the Title IX compliance officer or anybody who tried to help you, or did these women stay neutral or the opposite?
My supervisor, I have to say, the highest female was, I felt like she was constantly trying to take me out of the picture. The Title IX person that would come every year and ask us questions about, you know, how do we think things are going? I constantly told, you know, they put me in a trailer outside. They moved me from my nice corner office to a 30-year-old trailer outside and tried to renovate it. I told her that. I told her our budget was too low. I told her that I was extremely underpaid for doing 2 sports. Everything, but nothing mattered. You know, I brought my granddaughters, a newborn granddaughter. My assistant happened to be my daughter. My supervisor told me that she can't be brought anymore, and we can't bring her anymore. But then there were kids running up and down the hall from the men's soccer coach.
So did your supervisor, the person that did your annual evaluations, did she regularly attend your practices?
She came to quite a few. You know, she'd come and look, and everybody there was, you know, I had my volunteer coach, first of all, is a former FBI agent. So she's not going to let me mistreat kids, you know. So we had her for a few years. My supervisor would come, the compliance would come. They would come just to be outside, watch. They'd sit in the stands, watch practice, and listen to music. And they're like, "Oh, you have the best job out here." And my trainer was constantly there. I always had a trainer there. Other coaches would come and watch our practices. And yeah, there was always people there, always people there.
With regard to the athlete complaints, were they always characterized as, 50-50 or they're negative, but were you ever told specifically what behavior was unacceptable? Or is it just that there were negative complaints?
They told me, well, both. When I went to, finally, when I had the meeting with ELR, the investigation is employee labor relations. And that was, I had 2 meetings with them before I was let go. And before that, my supervisor would say, one time she told me, she said, you know, you call the twins, and you should call them by their name. They're identical twins and they dress the same. And she told me that. So I made it a point, and we're talking far, these kids are not close up when you're coaching. And I would say, "Nice job, twin. Is that you, or is that Lindsay, or is that Lauren?" And they'd say, "Lauren," or, you know, I'm like, "Nice job, Lauren," you know, because they were far away. So I made it a point to find something to be able to tell them apart, no matter what. And I made my staff also figure that out so that they called them only by their names. But that was one of the complaints on the list with ELR. There was that, there was, "I'm not prepared," although my team, for the entire time that beach existed, was in the top 20 in the country, top 15, top 12, Final Four, ABCA Coach of the Year. And so it just kept going around and around. The surveys.
And how many years did you have to endure this treatment?
I endured this probably the entire time I was there, but it got really bad toward the end, and we got a new athletic director, and people even would say, your protector's gone. And so when the old athletic director left, who hired me, I was gone within a year and a half. I believe it was, year and a half. I was gone.
Thank you so much for sharing, these insights. I know it must be really hard to talk about it. You know what I mean?
It does
So,
bring up some anxiety.
yeah, absolutely. Let's hear from a coach colleague. So we're going to turn now to Petra Martin. Petra was a former head swimming coach at Rutgers University, at Bowling Green State University. After she left Rutgers, she went on to the University of Arkansas as a swimming coach. Rutgers settled a legal dispute with Petra, paying her $750,000 and publicly exonerating her of allegations made by several swimmers and parents. Allegations that said Petra, that you had bullied athletes or created a toxic culture within the swimming team. Can you explain what happened? Can we just hear in your words, so our audience has a sense of how the double standard presents itself in real life?
Sure. Hi, everybody. Thanks for being here today, and glad that this is being put on. I'm sure it's helpful to a lot of folks. Yeah. So I mean, it has been a couple of years now, but I was at Rutgers. This is, like I said, several years ago now. And, I kind of give the background a little bit. I came into a program that was kind of struggling, both athletically, academically, social life of the athletes was not necessarily in order either. So there was just a lot to do, but I was excited to get to work and, help the university and help the program kind of rise back up to the top. And so we're kind of plugging away. And first year was tough. We had to kind of implement a lot of different things that the team particularly maybe did not like or was not used to, but it was, we made sure that was done the right way. Everything was always checked with the administration, kind of follow the right procedures. Everybody was informed all the time, and communicated with. And then my second year there, really, we really kind of took off and started doing well in the pool, in the classroom, had a lot of success. And honestly, things, really starting to click. And I know we talked a little bit ago about evaluations, right? Student athlete evaluations. And so that second year, I actually, after that season, I had really good evaluations. My athletic department was, putting me up as a, hey, you guys, to the other coaches saying, hey, this is how you rebuild the program. This is how it's done. A lot of success. I got recognized for that. And then it was pretty much within a couple months, within like 5-6 months. One day I was just called in and said that, there's some allegations of, this and that. And then within like a couple days, it was over. I was gone. So it was, it was kind of really quick. And to be honest with you, I was really just confused at that point and not sure what was happening, how, that quickly things changed and where all of this was coming from. So, I think, obviously once we get past that difficult period and start working back with the athletic department and, with the people that I decided to go with Tom, I think we were able to work things out, between me and the university. And I think Rutgers did a great job kind of coming back around and recognizing some of these things and really, educating themselves and us on how to do things better for female athletes, for female coaches, and how to understand better, their athletes as well, how to listen to their, evaluations or their complaints, or how to appropriately evaluate coaches. I really appreciated them doing that and kind of coming back around, and the settlement obviously was great too. And I do appreciate Pat Hobbs coming back and being my advocate down the road. So I think coming kind of full circle around and everybody learning from this was really important.
So were the complaints from an individual athlete, or was it an annual evaluation? Where did
No, so it
complaints?
was no, because my evaluation was great at the end of the and that was everybody, right, from the team.
Right.
And then so the complaints, it was just a couple athletes. So yeah.
Was there a formal investigation of those complaints, or just the asking you for your resignation?
There was an formal investigation at that point. No.
There was not?
No.
Not. And no formal, all right, no formal investigation. Did you have any female advocates above you who tried to help you? Is that, I mean, who's responsible for the institution eventually coming around, or did it require, pressure on the part of attorneys or other people?
Yeah, I mean, there really wasn't much. And when it comes to swimming community, we are really the minority when it comes to female coaches in our sport, especially on the head coaches level. So there really wasn't much. And I actually ended up connecting with coach from a different sport, a female coach from a different sport, who eventually lead me to Tom. And then we started working together, and with another law group in New Jersey as well, to kind of cover all the different bases. But that's that was necessary at that point to to have those people involved to help me and kind of help the university, for all of us to come together and work this out.
Why did you decide not to pursue a legal remedy?
Well, I think we like I said, we arrived at a spot where I think the university and the department, I think they did the right things, right? Like they eventually came around. They did the investigation afterwards. They did clear my name at the end of it. And I think that was a lot more important than going into a lawsuit. And because I did wanted to get back into coaching as well, and seeing their genuine kind of correction of what happened was, I think, the best result that we could have hoped for.
Right, right. A question for Nicole, just while we're at it. Has there been any research about the prospects for future employment related to male and female coaches, or female coaches, who have sued their institutions or been accused of professional conduct?
I know there's some informal databases around this that track the rehiring of men or women who have brought cases. To my knowledge, and Tom and Jill would probably be better to answer this, but I don't think in most cases, maybe 99.9% of coaches that have brought suits against their institution have they re-entered the labor marketplace in coaching at the same level. So if you're like a Division I Power 5 head coach and you sue your institution, it is really unlikely you're going to be rehired as a Power 5 head coach. You might go to the youth or club level, or high school or your local rec team, but you're not coming in at the same level. Now, I don't have data to support that, but I'm pretty sure I'm right.
Gotcha. And Rita, same subject. Here you are, approaching probably the end of your career, at least approaching retirement age. I know how old you are, right? Rita was at the University of Houston while I was at the University of Texas, and I admired her play, even though she beat the University of Texas most of the time. But seriously, did anything occur to you in terms of, why am I fighting this? Given the odds that Nicole just mentioned, why have you decided to pursue this more right now?
Well, first of all, because I have a platform to be able to maybe protect others that are going through the same thing, that do have a long career still in their eyesight, so that they can continue and do the things that I did. I mean, I had a great career until this happened, which I was excited about my next year. We had just come off NCAAs. We were 12th in the nation. I had a great group returning. I had a lot of kids that I had recruited that were coming in, and I was really looking forward to being one of the powerhouses on beach. And then it was all taken away from me, so it hurts because your character and your moral integrity are being challenged and questioned. And I know what kind of a person I am, and people that know me know what kind of person I am. But when you're told that you're a bad person and you hurt kids, you hurt their feelings, you're mean, you're bad, you're toxic, you're this, it really hurts your heart. So I feel that my name at the end of my career was tarnished, and I don't agree that I should just let it go, because that's not okay. It's just not okay. I've had too long of a career for someone just to throw me away like a piece of trash.
Yeah, kudos to you. So let's talk to the defenders of coaches like Petra and Rita, and we'll start with Jill Swagerman, who's a partner and an employment discrimination and civil rights attorney with Newkirk Swagerman, a law firm that specializes in helping employees who have been harassed or discriminated against based on their gender. I'm saying this because I've worked with this crew before and admire them greatly. I don't know of another law firm that has done more athletic administration or coach cases. The verdicts and the settlements that they have achieved reflect their expertise and their success in this space. Jill, could you just speak about just overall about your observations of double standards in both coaching and athletic administration? Are there commonalities among all of these cases that you brought?
Sure. I, like everyone else on the panel, am very honored to be here. So thank you very much for having me. Yes, Donna, there are commonalities, and I think Rita and Petra have kind of hit a lot of what that is. And Rita was using a lot of the buzzwords: abusive, toxic, mean, my coach hates me. Those are all very, very common things that we are hearing when it comes to complaints about a coach from a student athlete, from a parent. And I think when you start to unravel those comments, the other thing that we find that is very common is that there's not really much to those comments. But when you have an investigator, someone, from the Title IX office, who you've complained to 19 times, but has no idea how sports work, and often may not have an understanding of how involved parents are with their child, their adult child at the university level. And so they don't have this kind of understanding, and they come in and they hear, oh my gosh, my coach is abusive. Well, they don't ask the right questions. They don't come in and say, well, what does abusive mean? Let's talk about that. What is she doing that's abusive? Instead, coaches are being labeled as toxic, abusive, emotionally abusive, right? And those labels stick because they're super powerful. And so you have the commonality is you have a bad complaint that doesn't have much substance, if any. And then you have an investigator who says, oh, I heard a really bad word about you. I'm going to now take that and run with it. And that's how coaches lose their careers, just like that, just super fast. And that's the commonality that I'm seeing amongst these cases.
Any advice for coaches, administrators who are, feeling that one day they may have to challenge differences in treatment that they're experiencing, or defend their employment rights, or they might have gotten a funny reaction to a Title IX equity mention? Any practical advice you can give to coaches that might protect them later on?
Donna, I have so much advice. I don't even know where to start with some of this stuff, because there's different levels of it, right? You've got your administration, and there's so much advice that needs to go with the administration that they're not understanding, they're not seeing, they're looking at it from a perspective of, gosh, I got this complaint and I just don't want to mess with it. Oh, just, back away. It's terrible. Let's just get rid of it. And the easiest and the fastest way to get rid of it is by getting rid of the coach. So there's a lot of things that have to happen at the administration level, which coaches have no control over. But if there are administrators on here, there's a lot of things that they can do to get ahead of this. Open communication with the coach.
Jill, can I just jump in really quick, just to kind of flip the script here? If higher ed administrators took the student evaluation seriously of all professors, we would have no faculty. We would all be fired. Like, this is just the reality. So if you put that onto athletic administration and coaches, I mean, anyway, I just wanted to mention.
You're here.
Yeah, so and Nicole, you're exactly right. No one would have a job. No one probably should have a job. And yet, for some reason in administration, athletic directors freak out and just get rid of the coach. Instead of actually going to practices. One thing that I think coaches can do, and I had a client do this once, is she did it for her own purposes, but I think it's great advice, is that she recorded every single practice. And so she had hours and hours and hours of actual coaching methods, what she was doing day in, day out. Her assistant coach, who's the one who complained about her, was on the side, on the phone, or at one point, I think, brought in a magazine and was reading, and she had all of that on video to show that she was actually doing her job. So there are practical things that coaches can do to try to protect themselves. But I think that relationship between the administration and the coach is key, right? Most are going to have a sports administrator, depending upon the level. Sometimes that can be the AD directly, right? Depending on the size of the school. But having that and coming up with, even just a list of between the two of them, these are the kind of coaching methods that I'm going to engage in. These are not the kinds of coaching things I'm going to do, right? And where we get into trouble a lot of times, and where the double standard comes in, is because that female coach is expected to be very nurturing, very warm, is expected to be tough, but also when the student athlete is struggling, needs to care for them and become more of like a mother figure, as opposed to a coach who says, get back out there. You know, you've got a job to do, go do your job. And so there becomes an inherent conflict there, and having that discussion between administration and coach, I think just talking about it, putting it out there, letting them know like this is a real thing, can change a lot. I think once people acknowledge this and see it and they say like these are what I'm going to do, right? I'm not going to talk to my student athlete about her weight, right? That's always a hot button that will get you in trouble real fast. But I am going to talk about fitness and the fact that she's not running to first base fast enough, right? So I will talk about how she needs to improve her time to first base, but I'm not going to talk about her weight, and I'm not going to talk about how she's in terrible shape and everything like that, right? So having those sorts of metrics and things like that, I think can really help with the complaints that ultimately come in, because what we see is someone saying, my coach literally said she hates me. And no coach ever says, I hate you, right? Like we know that that's not true, but the language is different. And I think, you know, I'll use my daughter as an example. She says the word literally about 14 times in a 5-minute conversation. And that is not an exaggeration. I have counted. And so she'll say the word literally, and my coach literally told me that she hated me. And so, right, well, let's pull that back. You know, what are we doing? What are we saying? What kind of language are we using? And having those sorts of conversations between coach and administration, these are the kinds of things that I'm going to say to my athlete. And of course you can't, you know, you can't have a list of, you know, do's and don'ts of what you don't say, but it's out there and you've acknowledged it and you're gaining that trust, right? The athletic director needs to be part of the process, just like the coach needs the athletic director to be part of the process. And once you can make that connection, I think the coach stands a much better chance of surviving a bogus investigation, because maybe it doesn't even get to that point because the athletic director or the sport administrator is already involved, but they have confidence that the coach is doing the right thing.
Hey, Jill, a quick question in terms of, have you found in your cases that the athletic administrator doesn't know the difference between corrective action, letting somebody know right away whenever there's a question about technique or pedagogy or whatever, and you know, kind of gathering data for an end of the year blast? Are administrators aware of their responsibilities as supervisors in terms of correction versus termination? You know,
I don't think so. You know, a lot of what we're dealing with that kind of thing is HR. And a lot of the sports administrators do not have HR experience. They don't really know what they're doing. It's all based on gut feelings. And so they don't have the experience. They don't have the wherewithal to say to the coach, like, look, I'm hearing some grumblings. Let's talk about this. Let's go through with this. Instead, they ignore it. They let it escalate, and then it snowballs to the point where you can't fix it. And then they think their only option is, let's get rid of the coach.
Gotcha. Let's turn to the other half of Newkirk, Zwagerman, Tom Newkirk. Tom has been a practicing civil rights attorney for 35 years. He's younger than he really is. What people may not realize is that he spends a substantial amount of time educating universities about the harmful effects of stereotypes and how failure of universities to confront this issue is undermining the coaching profession and holding women back from full equality in leadership roles in women's sports. So Tom, can you start by talking about the more subtle aspects of how gender inserts itself into the expectations we have of women coaches and administrators? You're on mute. You're on mute.
I forgive everyone else advice. Thanks for having me, Donna. We appreciate it. And thanks for Petra and Rita for coming. Your stories are so important. I just want to back up real quickly and just note that, yes, what Nicole said about people that sue their employers having difficulty getting employed is true. But I want everybody to know that it doesn't mean you can't challenge your system. It doesn't mean you can't challenge your employer. We work tirelessly to ensure that the coach isn't just have to lawsuit versus nothing. There's lots of things we do to educate, to inform. And I think Petra's example is a great one. When she came to see us, it took us 10 months to educate the university, but we made a presentation to them. But eventually they came around and believed that gender had affected her and they cleared her name. And Petra is probably one of the primary examples of someone who got hired as a result of that. So don't be afraid to come forward. There's lots that can be done. I wanted to make a little pitch for that. So I think for the most part, over the last 20 or so years, it really comes down to two things that really people have a difficulty understanding. Well, I think Nicole, she said, gender bias is rampant. She says that, but most people don't really understand what that means. What does it mean that gender bias and gender stereotypes are rampant? It means this. Every administrator listening to us right now, every coach, every single human being who participates in college sports in some way holds some form of gender stereotypes about women that affect their evaluation of that women when acting in a coaching or leadership role, full stop. Every man, every woman, every athlete, every parent, every administrator. That's what the social science suggests. It doesn't mean you discriminate every single minute, but it means that biases and stereotypes will be held in the minds of people who are evaluating Petra Martin's behavior, Rita Crockett's behavior, every coach's behavior. So what does that mean then? You have to understand that a lot of people hold these stereotypes and it acts on your decision making. The other part that's hard to understand, the subtle aspect of it, is how the stereotypes work if they're held in the mind. How does it work? So it's not that people walk in and say, I don't like a woman coaching me. That's not what happens. What happens is that Petra or Rita or a coach will come in and she'll be exhibiting what Dr. Lavoie referred to earlier, the masculine coaching traits that are necessary and expected of athletes and administrators to be successful as a coach. You can't be viewed as successful as a coach unless you exhibit masculine behaviors such as firmness, directness, authoritarianism. Maybe that's not the way it should be, but that's the way people expect it and athletes expect it, both male and female. But as a woman, doesn't matter how firm you are, no one will ever forget you are female when they're evaluating you in terms of whether or not you're engaging in nurturing behavior. And so what happens is that the athlete, all athletes, all parents are coming in and observing whether the coach is leaning too far masculine, too little feminine, and it's constantly a balance for Rita and Petra and other coaches. And to their credit, they've walked that line for years, but at some point, this process, this double standard will always catch up with probably every single coach in some way, either by stressing them out and forcing them out or by getting complaints. Some will survive. Lisa Bluter survived. She in Iowa, she recently retired, she survived. But if she'd hung out for years, she may not have. You just never know. I've seen lots of Hall of Fame coaches who don't survive. That's what's really hard about it, is when you try and address this with coaches or universities, they don't understand how rampant it is, how many people hold biases, number one. They don't understand that women and female athletes hold strong biases toward women, just like men do. And if they do understand that, even if they're willing to understand, they don't understand how powerful the bias is, that it causes the misinterpretation. Like Jill talked about, the interpretation of me. It's no one ever asks the athletes, or, what did she do to cause you to hate her or think that she hates you? What did she do? Petra is one of the great examples. She was accused once of someone telling her athletes not to take her mental health medication. Now, Petra never said any words like that at all. The words never came out of her mouth. I think she was standing there on the pool once when some athlete was talking to her about some issues she was having, and because Petra was silent, the athlete interpreted that as the coach and believing she does not take her medication, even though the words never came out. Jill and I get it all the time as well. Athletes are called, she called me fat, she called me this, and those words never came out of the coach's mouth, but somehow it becomes true. So these are just some of the complicating factors of it, but it's a very subtle and powerful process.
When you go in, Tom, to educate an administration how to minimize the prospect of that bias, what do you tell them to do that they're not doing?
Everything? No, I'm joking. I'm jumping on the train. Everything. Well, the first thing we do is I write the world's longest letter ever imagined by a human being to explain this to them. So either A, they're going to help our client, or they're going to be so tired reading it that they're going to give up. That's how we do it. No, but we educate them on, how bias works, the extent of it. We use social science. We use anecdotal information. We are very, very, we reduce defensiveness. We're not accusing any administrator of being sexist, of racist, or anything like that. It's not what it's about. It's about understanding that this is a real risk in college athletics, that college athletics is different than other organizations. I know that the gender exists in the law. I'm sure it does. But in college athletics, it is about 10 to 20 times more powerful and more extensive than in any other industry in society. It absolutely is. It's at least 20 years behind the times when it comes to dealing with this stuff. So you've got to address it knowing that the administrator who's listening to you is going to be in denial, going to be defensive, going to not understand what I'm talking about. And one of the most difficult things we face, you talked to, I think, Jill earlier about the investigations, is that the administration will have like a lawyer investigate it. And they think that this lawyer knows what he or she is doing, and often they do not, because they don't understand gender bias and how it works any more than anybody else does. But so what you've got to do is you've got to explain it to them, and you've got to explain it to them. Jill and I are probably speaking more aggressively in this call because we're advocating today. But when we talk to administrations, we try and speak more gently, more diplomatically, like, let's learn from this process. And so it's just difficult to break through, but Rutgers was a great example of when we broke through.
How common is that to get a reaction like Rutgers as opposed to combativeness?
What's that?
I said, how common is the Rutgers reaction as opposed to combativeness and defensiveness, knowing your lawyers?
Well, the reaction of Rutgers to actually clear Petra's name and to advocate for her when they had fired her for alleged abuse that's a one-off. That's the only time we've been able to do it. And that's why Petra is so complimentary of Rutgers. Even though they fired her and undermined her career, at the end of the day, they were able to listen and make a difference. And we've had some universities who are willing to listen, who want to listen. But the problem is, even if you have an administrator who's listening to us today, who says, I'd like to make a difference here, they've got to deal with the fact that they've got HR to deal with, or legal to deal with, or the athletic administrator to deal with. It's hard to convince a group. And so, but we do make progress in other ways, just, getting people to make some changes and to save we can save a lot more jobs if we get to the administration before the coach is fired. That's one thing we do.
Are insurance policies negative or positive influences? When you know that you don't have to worry about the cost of legal expenses coming out of your budget, or settlements coming out of your athletic department budget, you're not responsible for it because my insurance policy takes care of it.
There's no insurance in universities, Donna. There's never any insurance that I've seen. Maybe a private.
They don't have policies?
No.
Are they self-insured?
Most are, yes, that I know of.
So that's coming from their bottom line, not necessarily the athletic department.
That's right.
I got you.
But what we do, yeah, go ahead. Sorry, Joe.
Sorry to interject here. Generally, yeah, some smaller private institutions may have insurance, and that can be a barrier because the insurance company also doesn't understand it. To trying to get things resolved. And insurance companies don't care about coaches' names being cleared or changes being made to make the university or college better. But in regard to most state institutions, that our experience is that those generally come out of the general fund. Maybe not even the university system. It may just come out of the state budget.
And this is for both Jill and Tom. Is there any advice that you give specifically in terms of, we know that parent-athlete complaints are at the impetus for many of these cases. what do you tell them in terms of handling those complaints?
It's,
I mean,
we-
and how does a coach get the administration to even discuss it, or how do you bring it up?
two parts of the question. The first thing is, what do they do about it? It's actually not as difficult as anyone thinks. Okay. Bias is like bacteria. It's extensive, it's harmful, it's not evil, it exists in our brains. We're required to have it, just like bacteria is. But somehow hospitals figure out how to wash their hands and use sterilization techniques to ensure that you reduce that risk. And we can do the same for administrations. And one way that administrations need to do is they simply need to, one of the other aspects of stereotyping that have been talked about is gender socialization. And what that means is that we socialize male and female athletes to complain differently. And so administration is actually responding not only to the biases toward the coach, they're responding in a biased way toward the athlete, where they're coddling and enabling the female complaint differently than they would if a male brought it forward. Okay, so what you've got to do in this process is you've got to create a funnel system that collects complaints. Like Jill said, these are adults, and you've got to collect complaints in a very specific way so that you requiring the athletes do it timely. They don't get to go back 10 years or 5 years or 3 years or 2 semesters. Like any adult, make a timely complaint about their coach. They need to put it in writing, and they cannot use labels. They can't say bullying. They can say the words that describe what the coach did to justify the label of bullying. Just those simple changes, as well as actually training administrations to understand bias and stereotyping in a way that myself, Jill, Dr. Lavoie, and the two coaches on this talk here understand it, can make a huge difference in reducing the number of complaints. I'll let Jill, if you want to answer the other part of the question, that's kind of how I would do on the changes.
Well, and I think just going along with that, just as an example, I had a coach and she had a sexual harassment complaint and then a retaliation firing after it. And I got in there and I thought, you know what, I'm going to see probably that this coach has, 10, 15 student athlete complaints. And she didn't have any. There wasn't one. And she had been there for 20 years. And I thought, what is happening here? And I asked her, and one of the secrets that she had, I think she was, it was just a little bit different, little different environment, little different level of play. But she was pretty careful about, who she would recruit. And one of the things that she did was she made sure that she would talk to their coach as much as she could, to find out what is this athlete about. And she'd do her research on the athlete to make sure that they fit in the program. And she would say, sometimes I would let really good kids go because I just knew that it wasn't, their parents were too involved in the process. Like I wasn't able to talk with the athlete. I would have to talk through the parents the entire time, which means we're going to have really overactive parents who are going to have a lot of expectations. So there were some things there, but I thought probably the most important thing that she did was that she would talk with the parents and the students, and she would lay it out and she would say, look, I am your coach. That is my role. I am not your mom. I am not your friend, right? And she would do it very, very good. She's like, I support you. I care about you, but these are going to be our boundaries. And she laid that out very clearly. And I think that was in her situation that worked. I'm sure that coaches are doing something like that. But it just was one of those things where she was having the conversations with the parents too, and letting them know, she would ask them, how many of you have ever had a female head coach before? Right. And just asking that question then all of a sudden makes them, oh, well, we've never had a female head coach. Okay, maybe we can treat this a little bit differently. So there are some things I think early on in the process, like team meeting, parent meeting. I think that those are important because we don't have, I was a Division I athlete. I ran track. So I understand it. I understand the sport aspect from the student athlete position. And I have to say, it's entirely different than when I was a student, right? I didn't text my mom every night telling her how practice was. If I wanted to text, I couldn't text my mom. We didn't have text. I had to make a long distance phone call to her, you know, so I didn't have that option. So our communication is so prevalent. Parents are so involved. They get instantaneous, like the person hasn't even left the training room yet, and mom already knows how the practice went. So your communication, unfortunately, doesn't stop with the athlete, even though they're adults. And so I think figuring out a way to include the parents, but keep them at arm's length is probably the way that our future is going. It's especially important for females. And I think what I'm seeing is that it's starting to move that direction more with males as well.
Yeah, let me just ask one more question of Petra and Rita before we go on to audience questions. Both of you have been outstanding athletes. You've been tough on yourselves. You've probably loved coaches who are tough on you. Is there a substantive difference today in the nature of athletes and parents? Speaking to what Jill just said in terms of, are you dealing with different animals than when, and I don't mean animals literally, compared to when you were athletes? Petra, you go first.
Sure. So yeah, I think it's kind of funny because I do have experience on the club level as well, working with age group athletes, and I'm around that environment as well, and my kids are age group athletes, but it is it is different now, because I remember me as a when I was a kid, when I was an athlete, my parents would drop me off and they would go do whatever, or I would, carpool with somebody, and then they would pick me up after practice, right? Now, at our age group practices, for swimming, again, different sports could be different, but you look up and parents are sitting there the whole time, 2 hours, 3 hours, and just watching the practice. And there's, like we said, like the minute kids get out of the pool, they have their phones in their hands, and it's instant communication. And not that they shouldn't talk with their parents and stuff, but it also, I think it gets to the point a lot of times where it almost feels like the sport and the activity is supposed to be a space where they will be able to develop, kind of by themselves, have the opportunities to make mistakes, to grow, without having 24/7 supervision. And I think that is kind of missing a lot of times in today's youth sports. And then it kind of, keeps moving into collegiate athletics, not necessarily the parents are sitting there, but, with the instant communication and all this stuff. And I think at those points, something goes missing in this process of kids figuring out some stuff by themselves, or with the coach, or, with their peers, and just going, directly to the help of, of their family. So, again, family help is great, and it should be there should be supportive and everything, but I feel and I see that is a bit different today than like what we grew up with.
Gotcha. Rita.
Well, yeah, I'm very similar. I'm probably just 1 or 2 years older than you, Petra, but or maybe a lot more. My father actually never saw me play in high school, junior high, anything. He saw me at one Olympic competition, and it wasn't the Olympics. It was our USA team on tour, and we happened to be in Texas, and someone got him to go watch me play. That's literally the only time I had any thing happening with my parents being involved with my competition or anything. As far as now, it's even to the point where, if you would say something to an athlete, like, for example, you've got to get your arm high, something like that, a player, another athlete will go to that athlete and say, it's okay, don't worry, you know, it's okay. And it's not only the parents, it's everyone. If you do anything, it's, as a coach, it's like you're really the bad guy, no matter if you're trying to help or what. It's really become something difficult. And my daughter played club as well, and I club volleyball, and I would say, oh, that ball was in. As a parent, I'm like yelling on the sideline. My daughter told me to be quiet. So she was kind of an old school athlete as a young kid. And my granddaughter, I'll say, let's go, Tashi, she's 5, and so it just depends, I think, on how the athlete is raised, and how much they want people to be involved, because of their insecurity or their security. And that's the experience that I've had, from all the way down. So it is difficult now with the way kids are.
Yeah, thank you for that. Nicole, for you, one of the questions, is there research that shows that schools ignore negative complaints when teams are winning, and they lean in on the negative side when the coaches are losing to help justify letting them go?
Not to my knowledge, but I can imagine that is, if you have a losing team or a losing coach and there's a couple complaints, it might sort of add fuel to the fire versus everyone's happy when we're winning. But there's no concrete data on that to my knowledge.
Okay, advice from lawyers. If a coach is on the last year of their contract and a school chooses to not renew the contract due to complaints of athletes, parents, how do you handle that last year of contract? Just let them go, right?
It's the same. It's a termination. As far as we're concerned, universities a lot of times will like to play that game, but you have an expectation if your contract has been renewed other times and they renew other coaches' contracts, that your contract would also be renewed. So it's treated just the same way as a termination because of player complaints from our perspective.
Gotcha. Another question for Nicole. Are there any differences, or does research show that there are differences between how college women coaches are treated by competitive division, like D1 versus D3? Or is this a common problem with all 3 divisions?
I probably Jill and Tom could answer this, but I haven't seen any data on that. I think the assumption is that because Division 3 is, and I'm going to put this in quotes because I was a Division 3 athlete, less competitive, that we don't really, maybe the coaches have a little more latitude or leeway versus Power 5 coaches. But I would venture a guess that this is rampant at every level, that athlete complaints are happening up and down the levels of the NCAA, and that this is a consistent problem.
Gotcha. A question for Nicole. Are you familiar with the recent case of Terry McKeever, the longtime head women's swim coach at Cal Berkeley, who was fired in January of 23 after 29 years at that position? Are you familiar with that case at all? I won't ask you the question if you're not.
I mean, I know of the case, and I actually know Terry. I think she actually might be on the call. She was on the participant list. So, hey, Terry. What I don't know the details of the case. I don't, but what I will say is that Terry was the only, I think, and Petra, you might know this more than I or Tom. She was the only female to ever be named to the Olympic coaching staff for swimming. Like Terry was one of the most successful, long-standing veteran women in swimming. And because she was at that level and had that level of success, she was also open to being criticized and being taken down and unfairly evaluated because of gender bias and what Tom was outlining. So I don't know the specifics of what happened, the legal specifics, but I do know that coaches like Terry, who are highly successful, outspoken, have a long track record, you know, aren't going to put up, and I don't know if we can swear on this, so I'll just say won't put up with the BS anymore, are often targeted and pushed out.
Gotcha. So here's another question. An autobiography of Elizabeth Bizzell titled Silver Lining tells the story of how, owing to her considerable success at an early age, her coaches would have her work out with older girls and even boys, separating them from their own peers. And I'll add this myself. We have a common practice of having male practice players now in basketball and volleyball and soccer. Do any of you have feelings about whether this has positive or negative psychological effects?
Oh, well, Don, I read the rest of the question. It's one of, it's when I think one thing we need to understand here is that coaches are coaches. They're not a psychologist. They're not an eating disorder specialist. And there's this expectation, particularly on female coaches, where they're expected to know all of the mental health issues of their female athletes and intuitively respond to them. No male is expected to do that. And so I know we focus sometimes, I know the last part of the question is the, ignoring the psychological effects on the swimmer, but the answer is it's never as simple as ignoring the psychological effects. It's going to be that there are some indicators of someone under extreme stress, and that person has other avenues to get help that they need to pursue, including family members, et cetera. We all this vision of the coach who says, like, just buck up, and I don't care if you're weeping, and I don't care if you're thinking about killing yourself. Those coaches just really don't exist in today's world, or very rarely, even on the male side. And there's just so much resources. So I think that it's important. What we sometimes do is get focused too much on the potential harm of one athlete who has plenty of other resources, and I'm primarily focused on the fact that we always end up blaming the female. She's just expected to figure it out and solve the problem for everybody. It's a huge problem.
Question for Petra and Rita. Think to the beginning of your coaching career, the first time you were hired and the first time you put a team together, and now your standards are higher than probably most of the athletes who are entering your program, and probably higher than the coach that preceded you. And have you experienced, athletes leaving the program, toughness in terms of adjusting to you? I hear lots of complaints in that first year, for instance. Petra, what's your experience?
Yeah, no, definitely. I had that experience at Bowling Green, at Rutgers as well, and and I would discuss it with the team, and make sure that they understand kind of what the standards are, everything. But I also would make sure that I would ask them, like, hey, what are your guys' goals? Like, what do we want to do here, right? Because it's their team, it's their careers, it's something that they need to be willing to and wanting to do, and that we kind of gonna meet in the middle and things. So and I think a lot of times, what I've experienced, the problem is, that they might say, hey, yes, we want to do this, but then when things actually, when we do start taking the steps that you need to take to get there where they're telling you that they want to go, you know, they might not want to take those steps, right? Or, you know, so you go back and we're like, again, I'm like, okay, well, you said you wanted to have 3.5 GPA, but you're not showing up to the classes or you're not doing your assignments. So we can't get there that way. So, you know, there are steps on, you know, going back and, you know, trying to pull them back together. And for majority of them, they eventually get on board. It takes some time, but for some of them, you know, they didn't or they wouldn't. And at that point, then that's, you know, that's when conflict can arise. And a lot of times then you have other things coming into play, like scholarships, right? So, you know, if somebody's on a good amount of money, they will not want to give that up, or, you know, they want to stay on the team, and but might not necessarily want to do the things that they need to do that they told us that they want to do. And that's where, you know, you know, things might come into clash a little bit. So you know, that's when administration comes in as well, and you know, discussing those individual issues and kind of how to deal with it, and you know, which way we're going to go with this athlete. And obviously everybody's on board on you know, on those conversations, but that's where, you know, I think a lot of times you're gonna see some of the problems coming up.
Yeah, Rita, any thoughts on that?
I had a little different situation, you know, when I was at FIU, I built the beach program. So
Mhm.
when I came in, I brought the athletes in. So we had to do a lot of things as far as get them to understand the academic level that we wanted to be at. You know, I did have to change the mentality, the mental thinking for the court team, because their GPA was low as well. And in order to get that GPA up to 3.5, 3.6, or wherever we ended when I ended, it did take some convincing, you know, like, you have to go to study hall, you have to do this, if you don't do this, there's a consequence. And you're tested with those consequences. So in order to make these guys really do what they're supposed to do academically, because they're students first, they had to know, we're serious, you don't get to practice if you aren't going to your classes or study hall. And so I was really strong with that they would not get to practice if they were having that trouble. They would have to go into the SAC and go study instead of being in practice. And that meant that their play was in jeopardy, because they're not getting the same practice as everyone else. And of course, there were complaints like, I can't practice. Well, you're not going to be able to practice if you don't have the grades anyway. So that was my way of doing things. And that's what I would do with my daughter. You know, if her grades were down, she didn't get to go to practice. She had to stay home and do her homework. So I tried to treat the athletes the way I would treat my daughter.
The carrot of participation. All good things have to come to an end, and it's 3:30. I want to thank every one of you for sharing your knowledge, especially our coaches. Really appreciate your efforts with kids and your bravery in talking about this. And to all the attendees, a reminder, we'll answer all the questions, we'll follow up with notes, and to all of our panelists, thank you so much for being with us. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks.